everyone, Kelly here, and today I wanted to share everything that I read in the second week of January. And so in case you didn't see my first week January wrap up, I'm doing weekly wrap ups in January because I'm mostly reading short fiction and there's just a lot of it. So same thing today. I think I have like around 10 things to talk about, 9 or 10, something around there. I'm going to do these. I'm going to talk about a short story and then one nonfiction, and the rest are all like novellas. So let's do that. So the short story I read is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. And this is a really famous classic short story about this woman who is suffering from postpartum depression. They didn't call it that back then when this was written, but that's what we would call it now. And so her doctor and her husband, who is a doctor, decides that the best way to help with that is to put her in this room and pretty much isolate her from everyone, not let her do anything. There's nothing really in the room to entertain her. And so she kind of becomes obsessed with the wallpaper and like the designs on the wallpaper, and it's yellow. And things go from there, and what happens. And I had heard about this, a lot of people on BookTube have talked about it, and I had heard about it before, and I'm really glad I read it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed the story. It obviously makes me very sad that that was an actual thing that they did to people, to women especially, who they said were suffering from things like, I don't even know what they all call it, like hysteria or whatever. And so they would just isolate these women, which we know now is not really great for your mental health. And so yes, this was a really good one. I would highly suggest it. You can get it free online since it's a classic, so I would definitely recommend it. I might want to try one other story from this just to see if I like her story style in general, because I hadn't really heard of any other stories by this author. So I figured while I have this collection from the library, I might try one more, see if I like her style, see if she was just a one-hit wonder with The Yellow Wallpaper, and I'll let you know next week if I end up reading any more of her stories. And then I did end up reading a few other short stories, but I'm not going to talk about them till next week because I love them so much. I'm just reading the entire collection of short stories by that author. So tune in next week to find out who that author was that like sucked me in enough to read an entire collection of short stories. And now the only nonfiction that I read this last week, or that I finished, I should say, is I'd Rather Be Reading: The Delights and Dilemmas of the Reading Life by Bogel. And this is a collection of essays that's basically just about reading and a love of books. And so for anybody that's a book lover, I think this is kind of a must read. It's just nice to kind of feel seen in a book. And you know, you would connect to a lot of the things that she's talking about. I don't think there was anything in here that was like super impactful for me that would make me want to go out and buy my own copy of this, but I'm really glad that I read it. I gave it 4 stars. Basically almost everything that I'm going to show you today is for 4 stars. I had like a couple 5s and 1 3, but I, for the most part, just really enjoyed everything I read this week. So yeah, it was just 4 stars. I don't really know what else to say. Like, I basically split this up into like, oh, I still have my bookmark in there. I split this up into just reading like 2 essays a night before I went to bed, which was really nice. They're calm and comforting, and so if you want just something chill that is about something you love, which is reading, then I would suggest picking up a copy, like ebook or however you want to do it, and just read a couple essays a night. And then the rest of these are all fiction. And the first one is To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. I'm just going to talk about these in the order I read them. So this one, I had picked this up because I had read the first book in the Wayfarers trilogy or series. I guess it's probably a series now, by Becky Chambers, and I didn't really enjoy it. I know it's a really popular book series, but it just felt like there were too many characters we were following, and so it felt almost episodic, like a television show. And if that's something you enjoy, I see why people like the Wayfarer series. It's just not usually how I like my stories, and so I just didn't feel a connection to that one. Wasn't going to continue the series. But then I saw she had written this novella that was a standalone, so I thought I would try it. And this one only has 4 characters, and we are only in the head of the main characters. We're only following her perspective. And since it has a lot less characters, we're just following her. It's very linear and it's telling. I thoroughly enjoy this. I gave it 5 stars. I just gobbled this up. Like, I meant to just start reading it and then like put it down, and I could not put it down. Like, I even told my husband, oh, I'm going to bed in 5 minutes, and I stayed up for another hour just to finish it because I just had to. I loved it. I probably will reread this one. Like, I might even get myself a copy of it because I absolutely love this. So this is about 4 astronauts/scientists that are being sent to look for life forms on 1 moon and 3 planets. So they're visiting 4 places in another solar system. And it basically it's pretty slow moving. It's just following these 4 people as they get through their daily life on these planets, but then also in their spaceship, and just following their daily work where they're like discovering these new life forms. There's a lot of like alien life that we get described, and it's really interesting. And then they also just talk about the tedium of like writing it all down and like describing it all so that the people on Earth, when they get it, can kind of see what it is, and like taking photos and all this stuff. And I just really enjoyed all the like alien life form, but then also just the day-to-day of just only having 3 other people in your life for years. Like they're on this trip for a very long time, and just have the 4 of them as their whole lives, because they know that when they return to Earth, everybody they know will already have passed away. So like these 4 people are their life. And I just thought it was amazing. And also, I cannot believe that this was written before the pandemic. This was written in 2019, but there's a whole section in this that you can feel that feeling of like isolation, the frustration of not being able to get out and do things, and just the tedium of day-to-day life and boredom when you're not able to do anything outside of like your home. And there's a whole section in there like that I am so glad I read this during the pandemic, because I felt like this was exactly how I'm feeling, was how they were feeling. They're in space and we're on Earth, but it's still the same kind of like isolation, having to be at home, not being able to go out and do everything like you want to. And so I would highly suggest reading it now while we're still in that situation, unless that's gonna like cause you more anxiety or anything like that. But for me, it felt more like a comfort to like feel my situation in this book. So I highly recommend this. Absolutely loved it. And then I read Lady Susan by Jane Austen. This is a epistolary novella. I hope I said that right. It's written in letters. So everything is in letters, and it's a pretty short one, so you can get through it pretty fast. And I had never heard of this before BookTube. Before a couple years ago, I never even knew that Jane Austen wrote this. And that's because it wasn't published in her lifetime. So I think a lot of people don't include it in her like canon of work, since it wasn't published officially while she was alive. But it is a finished piece of work, and it is amazing. I gave it 4 stars. I absolutely loved it. It's very witty and fun. And it's all about this woman, Lady Susan, who is widowed, and her basically just scheming to get herself and her daughter a husband so that they will be better off than they are now, because her husband didn't leave her a lot of wealth. And so she's just kind of manipulating everybody to try to like get a better situation for herself, and mostly for herself. And yeah, she's not like your typical Jane Austen heroine. She's conniving and like charming, but like charming in a way of like, I'm trying to get you to do what I want you to do, and I really don't care about your feeling kind of manipulative personality. But it's so hilarious. I loved it. And then I ended up, I was like, we need to watch the adaptation. And I made my husband and I on a date night. We do like date nights at home, and we watched the adaptation. The movie adaptation is called Love and Friendship, and it's on Amazon Prime Video. At least that's where I got it. And it was super hilarious as well. I thought they did a great job with the character of Lady Susan in the adaptation. So if you didn't feel like reading the book, you could watch the adaptation. But I think the book was really well done. And I listened to it on audiobook. And the audiobook I did, I don't remember. I'll have to link it down below, like which exact audiobook I did, because I'm sure that there's a lot of audiobooks for any classic work. But it was one that had a full cast. So like there was different characters for each of the letters. And that helped me like make sure I knew who was talking and which letters we were following and all that. I would highly recommend it. It was a lot of fun. And then I picked up Artificial Condition by Martha Wells. This is the second one in the Murderbot Diaries series. And I had read the first one last week and talked about it and gave it 5 stars. This one I gave 4 stars. I still love Murderbot, But this one, I just thought the plot wasn't as exciting as the first one. Like the first one had like a moving plot that happened the whole time. And this one, we're more getting some more like backstory about Murderbot. And there is like a current plot, but I wasn't as invested in the characters in this one and what was actually happening. I was more just like excited to be with Murderbot again and their like personality that I just really enjoy. I still found this very fun. I still listen to it like all in one sitting because I really enjoy the audiobooks. So I would highly recommend them if you like audiobooks because they're just like so easy and fun to listen to. So yeah, still love this. 4 stars. Going to be picking up the next one next week. So you'll see that review next week. And then I picked up The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman, illustrated by Chris Riddle. And this is a fairy tale short story. I'll just show you pictures at the beginning so I don't like spoil anything, but just so you can see his artwork. So it's all like kind of black and white and gold and just kind of darkly whimsical, I would call it. Like it's definitely more of a dark fairy tale. And describing this one, it's so short. It's kind of like if you took Sleeping Beauty and Snow White and kind of mixed them together and then put some big twists in it and made it really dark. And that's what this is. It's very short, so you could read it very quickly, but it's definitely more of an adult fairy tale than a child's fairy tale and is on the darker side. But I really enjoyed it. I also think that if you are somebody that gets tired of fairy tales where we're waiting for the prince to come and save the day, this is like really focusing more on girl power in fairy tales. So yeah, I would suggest it for that reason. I thought the art was really good too, so I like that. And then I kind of continued a little bit of the fairy tale kind of feeling with the novella Silver in the Wood by Emily Tesh. I'd heard about this on Books and Lala's channel. She read this when she was doing her month of like reading only short books, and she didn't love this one. I think she only gave it 3, but I really enjoyed it and gave it 4 stars. This is kind of like fairy tale like. It's about this man who lives in the woods, and he kind of is from like, there's a mythology about the Green Man, and so he kind of fits in that like mythology. And then this young man who owns the manor house right next to the woods is walking through the woods one day, and kind of the gruff green man in the woods invites him in, and they kind of develop a friendship and maybe more. So there is like a slight romance in this. There's a lot of like fairy tale things. There is some darker stuff going on because this is also kind of a fae story as well. And I don't usually like fairy stories, but I think because this one leans more on the like Green Man mythology, I liked it more because it wasn't really focused on the fae, but it had that like dark element of the fae. So if you like more darker fairy tales, I would suggest this one. This also has a sequel that I will be hopefully reading next week, so I'll let you know how the duology ends up, but I really enjoyed that one. And then I picked up Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, and this has been like all over BookTube. Everybody seems to really be loving it. It's Japanese fiction that was translated into English. I ended up listening to this on audiobook, and I really liked the audiobook narrator. And the reason I listened to it on audiobook is that there's no chapters in this. It just goes straight through. And for some reason, when I open a book and there's no like chapters, I have a hard time because I just kept putting it down. I would like pick it up to start it, and then I would be like, oh no, I don't know when I would stop. Even though it's so short, I ended up basically listening to it all in one sitting, but for some reason I just could not get myself to pick up the physical copy. But then once I had the audiobook, you know, there's like chapters in the audiobook, so I, not like official chapters, but like, you know how audiobooks are split into like hour segments or whatever, so I just felt like there was a stopping point. That's just my weird thing. Does anybody have that? Anybody not like books with chapters? So yeah, this doesn't have chapters, but it's really short. And I love this. This was another 4-star. This is about a woman who's 36 years old, and she has spent her entire adult life working at a convenience store. And that's just where she feels like she fits into society, because growing up, she was always kind of like outside of the norm. Like her thoughts and things she would say, people would like shy away from her and be like, oh, that's weird. You know, what's going on with you? And so she just learned that like she needed to keep those thoughts to herself, and that she just needed to mimic what other people were doing. So it's just like following somebody that is not fitting into the societal standards of trying to like be ambitious. She doesn't care about like getting married or anything like that. She just wants to go to her job, and she knows she's good at it. She knows that she has purpose there in society, and she just wants like everybody to leave her alone and let her just be a woman in her 30s working retail. And I just really enjoyed it because I think we don't always follow this kind of character that doesn't fit into societal norms, and that we need to see that not everybody has that like ambition in life to do something more. You know, sometimes someone is just satisfied to have their place in the world. And so I would highly recommend this. It's short and it's really nice to read from that personality. There were times when I like laughed out loud, and there were times when it was really kind of sad, and so it just felt like true to life. And then I picked up The Beauty and the Beast by Gabrielle-Suzanne Barbot de Villeneuve. I don't know if I said that right there. She was French. This was written in 1740 and translated from French. This is the original Beauty and the Beast story. And then I got the Mina Lima artist version, where there's like, you know, different little artistic things in here, and every chapter has really pretty pictures, and of course I can't find it. Yeah, so like nice full page pictures. Sorry, I got these Beauty and the Beast bookmarks, and I thought they'd be perfect when I read Beauty and the Beast, so I was using that bookmark while I was reading. And this is my 1 3-star read of the week, which makes me really sad because Beauty and the Beast is my favorite Disney movie, and I was really excited to read the original story. And there's nothing wrong with the original story necessarily, but it's just so old. This is definitely written in like an old English style. Like, it took me so long to read this book. Like, it's only 200 pages and had a lot of illustrations, and it took me probably 4 days to finish because I would pick it up and I would just be like needing to stare at the words and reread some sentences because it just was like that older language. And then finally it got to where I was like, okay, I need to push through and I need to make myself finish this, because if I put it down, I won't pick it back up. So I did that, and I'm glad I've read it. Like, it's not like a bad book or anything. I'm glad I read it. It was just hard to read. You know how some classics are just harder to read than others? This one was very difficult to read, but I enjoyed like seeing where the story comes from. I could tell, like, because I've watched and read several adaptations of Beauty and the Beast, and I could see where different elements were drawn from the original story, since this is very different than Disney. Like, I would say the first half of this book is very similar to the Disney story, and then the second half is like completely different. And I've seen some other adaptations that take from that section that's a little different, so it was nice to have the source material, but I wouldn't say it was a favorite. But I'm glad I have this edition so I can look at the pretty pictures, and I might try it again someday when I have like maybe a little more experience reading that kind of language. But yeah, it was just a tough read, but worthwhile. And then I picked up The Test by Sylvain Neuvel, and this one I had also heard a lot of people on BookTube talking about, and a lot of people just describe it as being like an episode of Black Mirror. And that is exactly how I would describe it, and I reacted to it the same way I do Black Mirror. I've stopped watching Black Mirror because I would always, like, I would watch an episode. My husband and I were watching it like several years ago, and every time I would watch an episode, I couldn't sleep that night because it would just like mess with my head. I would just be thinking about it. There's still episodes that I still like, every once in a while they pop into my head and I still think about them and are disturbed by them. So I stopped watching that show because it was just too much for me. And so I don't know why I picked this up, but I did enjoy it. I did think it was really good, but I had the same effect in the fact that I read this too late at night and I couldn't sleep. So I ended up staying up until like 2 o'clock in the morning so that I could read, which I'll show you next. So I could read something light and fluffy because this like deeply disturbed me. So just going and knowing that it's disturbing, but really good. So the only thing I'm going to tell you about this is that this man goes in to take his British citizenship test. It's in a near future. So the test goes in a direction that you wouldn't expect. And this is one of those that like it starts off kind of casual and then like bam, it changes to like high anxiety for me for the whole rest of the story. It's short though. It's only 100 pages, so I was able to just finish it really quick. But yeah, it stuck with me throughout the night and really hit me, and it was definitely like high blood pressure going on the whole time I was reading this. So just know going in that you might want to make sure you're prepared for that. But I think it's really good, like the things that he was discussing in that. And so I gave it 4 stars. And then because I couldn't sleep last night after reading that, I ended up picking up The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane by Kate DiCamillo, because I just needed something cozy, and this is like a children's book. So I ended up just finishing this whole thing after the test to calm myself down. And I ended up giving this one 5 stars. I really enjoyed this. I've had a lot of friends on BookTube say that they loved it and recommending for me to pick it up, so I'm glad I did. This is like definitely a children's story. You can see how big the writing is, and there's like pictures and everything. But this is all just following this China rabbit who belongs to this little girl and his miraculous journey that he ends up going on. And this one is just basically about love. It's just about being loved and loving other people. And so it's just sweet and heartwarming, and it's very quick. I would highly suggest it. Even as an adult, it was just really touching. And this is definitely something I'll get a copy of someday and share with my kids. So yeah, that's everything I read this week. I had a great week. Only one 3-star read, and even though Beauty and the Beast was 3 stars, it was a high 3 stars in the fact that I am glad I read it and enjoyed the experience of being able to like see the original fairy tale. And then everything else was 4 and 5 stars. I love like so much of what I read. This is showing that obviously I was wrong in my assumption that I don't like short fiction. I obviously love it if it's in the right genre, and most of this was speculative fiction, but even like some contemporary stuff I do enjoy. So yeah, I just really enjoyed everything I read and would highly suggest all of it if it seems interesting to you at all. If you'd like to talk about any of these things, go ahead and leave a comment, and I'll talk to you down below, and I will see you next week when I share all the things that I have read in the 3rd week of January. Bye!